Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
Would you present yourself?
My name is Nancy Egloff. I'm a historian with the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation here in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Okay. And I know you have a lot of information, but what interests me really much is anything about John Rolfe.
Okay.
Because when I read the literature, books, internet, and so on, everything that was I could find, he found tobacco, he got married with Pocahontas, Pocahontas died, he dies, end of story.
Okay.
So any information you could fill in?
Well, let's see. We know that before he left for Virginia in 1609, he was married for the first time to an English woman who traveled with him. And they traveled as part of a 9-vessel fleet, leaving in the summer of 1609. This fleet got caught up in a summer hurricane in the Atlantic. The hurricane scattered the fleet. Some of the vessels got to Virginia later that summer. The vessel, the largest that Rolfe and his wife were on, the Sea Venture, was wrecked in Bermuda. So the 150 people who were on the Sea Venture wintered in Bermuda during that year. They were able to construct 2 other vessels to make the rest of the trip to Virginia in May. While they were in Bermuda for about 9 months, Mrs. Rolfe gave birth to a child. The child died. At some point, Mrs. Rolfe died, either in Bermuda or soon after arriving in Virginia. We don't know what else the Rolfes did in Bermuda, except have a child. But John Rolfe did get here in May of 1610, so that gets him here. And then the next we know about him is that by 1612, he's making a trial, sources say he's making a trial of tobacco. And by 1614, some of his trial is shipped to England. During this time that he's working with tobacco, he meets young Pocahontas, the daughter of the supreme chief of all the 14,000 plus Indians who live in Tidewater, Virginia. He meets her. She had been kidnapped by the English, was being held for ransom during a war between the English and the Powhatan peoples. Her father, Sonnecock, had stolen a lot of English weapons and tools. So the English kidnapped Pocahontas, held her for ransom so he would give things back. He did not return everything. They kept her. This is a real succinct story here. They anglicized her, baptized her, and she had met Rolfe during this period. We believe he owned some land or was farming some land up the James River, south of what is today Richmond. And we know she was up there being taught English ways and English religion by a clergyman in that area at Henrico. So the two probably met up there, courted, and married. He wrote a long letter about his desires to marry her, a quote-unquote savage woman. He was very passionate in his writing about his desire to marry her. It's quite the literature to read. And so they married in 1614, and soon thereafter, we believe in Virginia, had a child. So this would be Rolfe's second child, the first having died. This is their son, Thomas. By 1616, Rolfe has been named secretary of the colony, which means he's responsible for writing materials, keeping some records, and so forth. So he gets an official title. And the lieutenant governor here, Sir Thomas Dale, wants to use this marriage of an English with an Indian, a princess, Indian princess they're calling her, to promote the colony back home in England, to get more people in England to give money, to buy stock, so Dale puts the Rolfe family, now John, Pocahontas, who's renamed Rebecca, Christian name, and their son Thomas on board, and they go to England to promote the colony. And she is feted all over the place. She is taken to a first night ball by King James I and is paraded around, see what we can do with the Indians, how we can Christianize them, and, you know, please give your money because we can, these are the wonderful things we can do. And John Rolfe's tobacco is starting people are having an interest in that and wanting to grow tobacco. So give your money, right? Well, while they're in England, Rolfe writes a wonderful document called The True Relation, where he writes about the colony. So this is another one of his tracts. He gives the population of the colony. He writes what's happening in the colony as, again, a promotional tract to get people to have an interest in continuing the financial support. While they're in England, Pocahontas takes ill and dies just as they're ready to sail back to Virginia. They're getting ready in spring of 1617 to make the return trip back here, and she takes ill and dies at Gravesend, England. And John makes the decision to leave their small child, Thomas, with one of his relatives in England. So only John himself makes the trip back here.
Yep.
He's still secretary of the colony at that point. Some other things happen when he comes back here. He meets, he starts working some land that he also owns down the river at today's Mulberry Island, and meets the Pierce family, and takes his third wife, Joan Pierce, the son of his co-landowner William Pierce, the daughter of the co-landowner William Pierce. Is that something? Okay. Okay. So then he marries a third time, and they have a daughter. So he ends up with a son and a daughter, the daughter with Joanne Pierce. And he becomes a member of the governor's council during this period as well. So he's a man of he's an entrepreneur. He's an official in the colony.
Yep.
He's a landowner. The tobacco has taken off by the late teens to the point where actually in the early 20s there's a glut of tobacco and the prices drop because all of a sudden everybody wants land to buy tobacco, grow tobacco and sell tobacco. So what else can I tell you? That's the biography of John Rolfe in a nutshell.
Well, it seems that he was a quite busy man.
He was a busy man.
And a very important man for the Jamestown
right.
settlement.
Literate. He left us, as I say, the letter expressing his desire to marry Pocahontas, and also the official report, The True Relation, and some other literature too. So yeah, he's pretty busy. He died in about 1622. People used to say he died during the Indian attack of 1622, but probably not, because he had written his will prior to that, probably indicating that he was not doing well physically and was probably going to die. So he was preparing for that. So he died in 1622.
Yes.
So he's then, and Thomas, his son, doesn't come back to the colony until the 1630s to take up his claims to land in Virginia.
And he then went on growing tobacco.
Thomas?
Yeah.
Yep. He lived as an Englishman. He did not live as an Indian, even though he was half Indian.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, he was brought up in England.
Right,
so
correct, yep.
Rather logical.
Yep. So that's the biography of John Rolfe in a nutshell.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So if we try to go back, because now we have perhaps to exchange a little bit of, well, there's no proof of it. Let's just put it that way. The seeds that came to Virginia. If you follow the track from England landing on Bermuda, and we know that the Spanish had made all terrible rumors about Bermuda because they wanted as a stepstone the last island in the Caribbean before they went to Europe. So they have planted tobacco. It's from Bermuda, in their archives, we can see that had the Spanish tobacco on Bermuda. So wouldn't it be possible then John Rolfe took seeds from there and brought it to Virginia?
There are a number of possibilities. I can give you an article that I wrote about how did Rolfe get his tobacco seed. because he could have gotten it on Bermuda when he wintered there.
Yeah.
Correct. The Spanish, for whatever reason, decided, it was the Isle of Devils, so they decided not to establish a settlement there, which opened the door for the English, because when that group shipwrecked in 1609-10, they left a couple of Englishmen behind to claim the land, and it became English then.
Yeah.
And the Bermuda Company was founded a couple of years later. And planting tobacco in Bermuda was a big deal then, once the English established. So that's a side story. But anyway, so Rolfe could have easily gotten seed then. But tobacco was coming into England since the late 16th century via English ships from Spain, from the Spanish roundabout, but also via English privateering vessels who were making their way around the Caribbean, the islands of the Lower Antilles, Trinidad, Tobago. So seed could have made its way into England. There were tracts talking about how to plant tobacco in England, written in the early 17th century, which I've discovered. So they're actually trying to plant tobacco in England.
But that was the Rustica, the Nicotiana Rustica.
Perhaps,
yeah.
The
Indians were growing.
Right.
Francis Drake was smoking that kind of tobacco.
I don't know, because Drake was in the Caribbean, so they perhaps got a hold of the sweet-scented Nicotiana, Drake et al. So
that would be nice.
Yeah. So because the Spanish were growing it on Cuba and Hispaniola before they were growing it in Trinidad and Venezuela, I believe. So Drake et al. Could have gotten the Nicotiana and could have made its way back to England. So perhaps Rolfe could have even possibly brought the seed from the get-go from England. And another possibility is Rolfe didn't even have the seed when he arrived in 1610. There were any number of ships that came into Virginia via the Caribbean or via Bermuda from 1610 to 12. And perhaps, that's the long shot, there was seed on one of those ships too.
Yeah.
You know, that he had sent saying, bring me seed. We don't like the tobacco that's here. It's bitter, it's biting, it's nasty. I want some of the good stuff.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't have any evidence one way or the other. You know, if he brought it from England, if he got it in Bermuda, or if he got a hold of it once he had actually arrived here. Bermuda's the most logical of the three.
I would say so,
But,
because he was there.
Yeah.
Tobacco was there, so.
Right.
And we know that the Spanish king issued a death penalty for trading or giving seeds away. So he had to obtain it somewhere.
Somehow, clandestinely.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of privateering going on, English privateering.
Yes. But I like the idea of Bermuda.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's logical.
It's logical.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But we don't know, We also don't know for sure that his tobacco got back to England in 1613. There's a story that it arrived on the ship Elizabeth, but the ship Elizabeth there's no record of tobacco being on that vessel when it got back to England.
Well, it was not big quantities the first year.
No.
It first came later, and then start making plantations inside the fort.
Correct.
Everywhere it could grow. So a law was issued that 20% of the land should be used for growing food.
Correct.
And not only tobacco.
Correct. And the legislature, the General Assembly, had to reissue that law numerous times because people here wanted just to grow tobacco, failing to grow food crops to feed themselves. So
it was very short-sighted.
the legislature had to keep issuing this law.
Yeah. It's a funny story.
It is, yep.
They can smoke, but they starve.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we know anything about how they start curing the tobacco?
Well, from what you read, it sounds like they were originally piling it up on heaps, cutting it and piling it on heaps to cure in the fields, just cutting it and piling it. Because about 1617, I believe, there's a record of a Mr. Lambert, a colonist, trying to tie it with strings and hang it to cure rather than piling it. I think that they learned that with the humidity of our late summers here, piling it on heaps in a field was just going to make it rot.
Exactly.
So they started with about 1617, stringing it, whatever that means. Mr. Lambert tied it to strings and hung it up.
Yeah.
Is the first evidence for doing that. And then thereafter, you see other evidence of them stringing or hanging it up to dry, to cure.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nancy, thank you very much.
Sure.
There was
Is
a
that
lot of
all the
information.
questions? Okay.